Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be doing this or that rookie versus vet. And so, what we're going to do here is we're going to take rookies in the upcoming draft and compare them to vets and assess which player we would rather have. An example, like you're going to see, is going to be Jeanty versus Saquon, for instance. And so, we're going to go over the possibilities with the rookies, potential landing spots or situations where they might be better or worse assets for us in fantasy, and then compare them to vets and see which one of the two we would rather have.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get it kicked off the rip. So, like you said, the first slide we have Ashton Jeanty, who's the consensus 101 in a lot of rookie drafts this coming season, and we're putting him up against Saquon Barkley. So, very interesting take here. I think I'm leaning the Ashton Jeanty side, but let's hear some more of your thoughts of this or that.
Yeah, so in this instance, I would be taking Ashton Jeanty in basically with any conceivable situation regarding Jeanty. Uh, he could go to one of the worst landing spots, assuming he gets first round draft capital, and I would still probably prefer Jeanty just because of age. He's going to be a first round pick, so he's going to have that fifth year option, then potentially a franchise tag or two if he doesn't, get re signed to an extension at that point. With Barkley, you're probably still getting maybe 1 to maybe at most 2 to 3 years of elite running back one production. But I think you're just going to get the same thing with Jeanty, except he's way younger.
Yeah, and I've seen some mocks drafting Jeanty to the Saints, right? Top 10. Obviously, that wouldn't be the greatest landing spot because Kamara's there, but even then, I still like it in terms of him being like a goal line back, right? With Saquon, he was phenomenal last year. Will probably continue to be phenomenal for the next few years, but he has durability concerns. And Ashton Jeanty carried the rock a lot last year at Boise State, and he held up very well. So I take Ashton Jeanty in terms of the durability. Obviously, he may not have the big play upside as Saquon Barkley, even though he did show that in college a good bit. But yeah, I'm definitely going to lean Saquon Barkley here for sure. All right, so next up, we have an interesting one. We have Cam Ward or Trevor Lawrence. I think I probably lean the vet here, but let me hear some of your thoughts about this one.
Yeah, so I would prefer Trevor Lawrence. We know that he is for sure locked in with a brilliant offensive mind in Liam Cohen. He already has his established young wide receiver one in Brian Thomas. They're likely to upgrade in the receiving core via the draft. Brenton Strange is a fine tight end as well. I think that the offense is going to be schemed a lot better this year. I think Liam Cohen rather is going to use his players to their strengths, and I think T-Law is a fantastic buy low candidate. For Cam Ward, it's pretty locked in that he's going to the Titans. As far as the situation goes, the offensive line is definitely improved, but it's not, an elite offensive line by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of the running game, he does have Pollard and Tajay Spears, so there should be a decent running game. Then, Calvin Ridley is your wide receiver one. Chig is fine too, but the situation probably isn't remotely close, in my opinion, to that Trevor Lawrence is going to have this year. So give me Trevor Lawrence, but Cam Ward does have a ton of upside and theoretically could end up being the better asset.
Yeah, I think that's probably, there's a very low chance of that, in my opinion, him hitting as hard as Trevor Lawrence per se, because obviously Trevor Lawrence coming out was a phenomenal QB prospect. But I will say it's the landing spot really hurts Cam Ward here a good bit just in this particular scenario, because outside of Calvin Ridley, who shows up some games and then other games he doesn't, and outside of that, you only have Chig, and they lost Westbrook Akine as well, who was their number 2 option. So they basically have nobody at wide receiver this year. So it's going to hurt him a good bit. And then, like you said, Liam Cohen made Baker Mayfield look extremely good over the past couple seasons. So I think finally Trevor Lawrence gets some stability in terms of coaching. And I think he puts together a borderline QB1 season, in that top 12, I think, as long as he stays healthy. So I'm definitely leaning Trevor as well here. All right, moving on. We have an interesting one. I don't even know how to feel about this one in all honesty, because I'm not too high on Brees Hall, nor am I as high as consensus on Omarion Hampton as well. I'm gonna have to give this one a little bit of thinking. But how do you feel first looks Omarion Hampton versus Brees Hall?
This one is a complete toss up, in my opinion. As far as Hampton, if he were to receive first round draft capital and a prime landing spot, the Broncos come to mind. I think I would lean Hampton because of youth. Probably, if he were to be a first round pick, once again, the first round draft capital that Brees, for instance, does not have. But as far as Brees is concerned, I think he's talented. The pass catching role that he has is extremely valuable. He is a very good receiving back. And as far as, especially if you're in PPR, it's a scam, honestly, and it's great. So uh, it's a little bit iffy. It's kind of a toss up, in my opinion. If Hampton gets a good landing spot in first round draft capital, I'd lean Hampton. But if he goes second round and the landing spot's rather mediocre, I would probably lean Brees.
I'll give you an interesting stat. So, not to hate on Justin Fields, I do enjoy me some Justin Fields, but he's never had a top 20 running back season while he's been under center. So he's obviously hasn't had the best group of running backs. He's had David Montgomery, who's pretty much the best back he's had. Najee Harris, right? This past year, I did count that one as well. But outside of that, he's had no good running back seasons. And he also does not pass it to his running backs. At least in Chicago, he didn't. And obviously, Jaylen Warren wasn't getting much work last year. So maybe it's just the talent that he had around him, or he just doesn't throw the checkdowns to running backs and he just runs instead. So I think that could hurt Brees, because I think if Brees's receiving workload gets cut by like 30-40%, I'm completely off of Brees Hall, because I don't think he's nearly as efficient as a runner as I'd like. Honestly, like you said, if he ends up getting the first round draft capital, I think I lean on Omarion Hampton. But otherwise, if he ends up in that mid-second round, I'll probably lean Brees, even though I'm not in love with Brees Hall's value at the moment. So moving forward, we got another interesting one. We have Teteroya McMillan or Devonta Smith. I think I'm leaning rookie here. I did mention that, Devonta Smith's former Heisman Trophy winner. I think if they're both coming out at the same time, if they were both in the same draft class, obviously I'm leaning Devonta Smith. But with how the Eagles have, basically treated him as their wide receiver too, I think I'm leaning a little bit towards Teteroya McMillan. But let me hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, so for me, it's heavily favored in Tet McMillan's direction. I was watching a Ray Garvin video, Ray GQ, in other words, a couple weeks ago, and he actually compared Ted McMillan from a route success and deployment standpoint to Devonta Smith. And he actually mentioned that one of his outcomes is potentially a Devonta Smith-like career, which I thought was interesting because, in terms of, pure build, it couldn't be much more different, right? Ted McMillan's way taller and better after the catch, in my opinion, and has a bigger frame. But I found that interesting. But yeah, with Ted McMillan, he's likely to be a first-round pick, just like with Devonta Smith. And if I had to bet right now, I would definitely lean McMillan because while definitely he could bust and end up not being as valuable as Devonta Smith, I view Devonta Smith as a mid to low end wide receiver too, with some flash weeks. He's just way too inconsistent, and the ceiling just isn't that great. Where I would definitely make the bet for McMillan right now.
Yeah, and with the Eagles offense, how they're just, very run heavy with Saquon Barkley, and Jalen Hurts is very inconsistent as a passer as is, with, Dallas Goedert stealing a bunch of targets, A.J. Brown stealing a bunch of targets, Saquon even, Kenneth Gainwell. There's a lot of mouths to feed that offense, and sometimes Devonta Smith just will give you a 3 for 45 week, and that's it, right? And then the next week he'll have 6 for 130 and 2 touchdowns. That's just how he's always been. So with Ted McMillan, though, in the top, probably, he'll go in the first 25 picks guaranteed. I see him as a top 10 pick in my opinion, but consensus has kind of leaned him towards the mid to the late first round. All the teams that could take a wide receiver first round, like the Raiders, other teams like the Titans, even if they want to trade back up into the first round. I don't see any bad landing spots for him, really. So definitely going to lean Tet here. Moving on to the next slide, we got obviously one of our darlings, Travion Henderson or Kenneth Walker III. Unfortunate career thus far for Kenneth Walker. He just can't stay healthy. How do you feel about these two?
As far as I'm concerned, it would take a pretty devastating situation for Henderson for me to prefer Kenneth Walker over him. I think that Kenneth Walker is one of the most, if not potentially the most talented rushers of the football in real life. But as far as health, he cannot stay healthy. Uh, who knows if he retains a full workhorse role in this new offense because Charbonnet is a good running back. As far as Henderson's concerned, I would prefer him to not even be a full-time back for longevity purposes and health reasons. I think he would be perfect in a Gibbs-like role where you give him, 10 to 15 carries and then another 5 to 6 targets per week. I think he could put up Kamara, Gibbs-like numbers in a good offense. And I just think the explosiveness is there with Henderson to where he could potentially even be a Devon Achane like running back for us in terms of extreme efficiency and elite upside, albeit with one of these kind of smaller builds.
Yeah, and with Kenneth Walker, unfortunately, they spent significant draft capital on Zach Charbonnet, which is kind of interesting, right? Because they didn't really utilize him his first year. And now they're utilizing him and they're seeing what type of runner he is and how efficient he's been. With Kenneth Walker, he's got a year left on his contract, I believe, a year or two left on his contract. I don't imagine he gets re-signed just due to his durability concerns. So the long-term security of a job for him is very much in question. Travion Henderson, if he's even a first-round pick, he's got 5 years on a rookie contract. And like you said, on a limited workload, I think Travion Henderson can be insanely efficient. Yards per carry, he was at the top of the nation this year, 7.1 yards a carry, which is absolutely insane, especially playing in the Big Ten. So, yeah, I definitely lean Travion Henderson here. He's one of my favorite running backs in the class. If Ashton Jeanty did not exist, he would be my running back one. So, yeah, definitely leaning Travion Henderson here. Up next, we have probably one of the harder decisions I'll make this video. Tyler Warren or Sam Laporta. How do you feel about this one?
As of right now, this is as big of a toss-up as you can have, in my opinion. I agree with you. With Tyler Warren, I think if he goes to, for instance, if the Broncos were to trade up to get him, or if he were to fall there, or maybe even if he went to the Chargers, I would probably prefer Tyler Warren. But the Colts have been a popular landing spot in mock drafts, so if he went to the Colts, I would probably prefer Laporta because of the situation. As far as Laporta is concerned, he was one of the biggest sell-high candidates imaginable after his tight end one finish in 2023. And then this past year, definitely plummeted back down to earth. He's still a good tight end for us in the long term, but I don't know if he's as much of a difference maker as people thought he might be with the emergence of Jameson Williams. So if I wanted to be safe, I would say Laporta. If I wanted to shoot for upside at the moment, I would choose Tyler Warren. But like I said, if Warren gets a good landing spot and that first-round draft capital, I think it's a smash for Tyler Warren's side.
And like you said, in terms of upside, there's very few tight ends, maybe Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts, that have more upside coming out of college than Tyler Warren is. He can do everything, pass, throw, catch, anything imaginable you want him to do in an offense, he can do it. Kind of like a Taysom Hill, but bigger and way more physical. So I love Tyler Warren. He's my tight end one this year. And, Sam Laporta, if you watch the sell high video for tight ends, Sam Laporta's on there. And, it's one of those things. He finishes the tight end 8 this year. He's not a bad tight end. It's just the value for him right now is crazy. I think I'd lean Tyler Warren even if he goes to the Colts because I think if Anthony Richardson goes out there and does what he did last year, they're going to finally move off of him and Daniel Jones is going to get, the starting role. And I think he'll at least be able to hit Tyler Warren on 5-yard outs or whatever Anthony Richardson would miss him on. So, and then also if Anthony Richardson hits next year, yay, I'm glad Tyler Warren went to the Colts, right? So, yeah, I think I'm leaning Tyler Warren here, but Sam Laporta is definitely it's a tough one, right? So, Shadur Sanders or Dak Prescott? I'm going to let you go first on this one, but I definitely know how I feel.
Yeah, I definitely wish Shadur Sanders the best, and I don't hope he ends up busting. Just not the highest on him. I think the upside is Teddy Bridgewater, and the floor is Teddy Bridgewater. So basically, do you want Teddy Bridgewater or Dak Prescott? Prescott, while he's definitely streaky from year to year, has shown us multiple top 12 finishes in his NFL career and fantasy for us, including, I believe, a top 3 finish or two. So as far as fantasy upside goes, even with the age difference, I would definitely prefer Dak Prescott. He has his wide receiver one in CD Lamb. As far as Sanders is concerned, we have no idea where he goes, but he's not going number one, so he's not going to have that number one pick security. And it's actually been talked about that he could potentially slide into the back half of the first round. And while that still would be first round draft capital, it's really not the same as high end first round draft capital. And yeah, like I said, I just don't think the ceiling is very high with him. I worry about his ability to extend plays due to his lack of athleticism, the leverage that he forces his tackles to have to withstand is quite difficult for them versus edge rushers due to his pocket movements and his attempts to get outside of the pocket. And just the arm strength and the zip downfield just is not there. So I really just think that despite him being much younger and probably still being a first round pick, I would go with Dak Prescott, who has proven to us that he does have the ability to have top 5 finishes for us in fantasy.
And for the Cowboys, they're in an interesting position. At 12, do they go Ashton Jeanty? That would help Dak Prescott a lot, right? Consensus says Dak Prescott needs a running game in order to be, consistent. I don't know if that's necessarily true because he had a top 3 finish as Tony Pollard is the running back one for him. So, I don't know. It's weird because Shadur Sanders is in your rookie draft probably going to go in that 7 to 9 range, maybe even a little later in the first round for the rookie drafts. So you're basically thinking, are you wanting a late first for Dak Prescott? In all reality, I would take a late first for Dak Prescott any day of the week. But in terms of Shadur Sanders, I don't even value him as a mid-second. I think he's going to be very underwhelming in the NFL. And Dak Prescott, it's not like he's in a bad situation offensively. I think, they'll draft probably a tackle at 12 if I had to guess. But if they go Jeanty, that helps him as well. So I don't think they can make too many bad decisions. But, Jerry Jones will Jerry Jones and do something stupid, I'm sure. But, as long as Dak Prescott stays healthy, I would much rather him over Shadur Sanders. All right, moving on. This one might be the hardest one for me. Quishon Judkins or Josh Jacobs. Very similar styles of running for the two of them. How do you feel about this one?
I think I'm pretty easily going to go Josh Jacobs here. In most scenarios, I think we can both agree that Quinshon Judkins needs a good offensive line to hit at the NFL level. But if he does get that situation, he could potentially boom. For instance, if he were to go to the Bears with their improved and revamped offensive line under Ben Johnson, I definitely think he could have a ton of upside. But that's, once again, a very specific landing spot that would have a good offensive mind and offensive line there. With Josh Jacobs, we can say what we want in regards to LaFleur for fantasy wide receivers for us in that Packers offense. But as far as the offense is concerned, they definitely put up some points. And one thing I really like about Josh Jacobs, they're going to try to depend on the run game to close out games and control the time of possession late in games. And it just so happens to coincide with our fantasy playoffs. And so I think if you take a look at Josh Jacobs, for instance, right, towards the latter half of the season, he had multiple boom games with a ton of volume. And I think that's going to be fantastic for us. And if you're trying to contend this season, I think this Josh Jacobs could potentially be a good buy for you because at the end of the year, he should be getting a ton of volume and scoring plenty of touchdowns. And so once again, I think there is a scenario where Judkins is better for us in fantasy, but I think it's a lot more specific than the situation we already have for Josh Jacobs.
Now, I have a few interesting points to make here. I'm also citing Josh Jacobs here. And you remember when Jordan Love got hurt last year and they brought in Malik Willis, and Malik Willis, threw the ball like 18 times and they ran Josh Jacobs like 35 times. That is another realistic possibility where Jordan Love gets hurt again. If that continues, Josh Jacobs will just have a monster load of work in terms of running the football. And that's one thing I love about Josh Jacobs. Third and fourth quarter, he's a lot like Derrick Henry, where he's relatively hard to tackle, and the defenses are going to be tired. And for some reason, people like Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, they just have an endless gas tank, and they just keep going and going and going. Yes, I love that style of runner. Now, I will say in terms of Quishon Judkins, the Bears do have 2 second-round picks, so he's a very likely pick for them if he's still around there for one of those second-round picks. Because, they have the Lightning with DeAndre Swift, which, say what you want about Swift, he is fast, and he is like the Gibbs type of runner for Ben Johnson. I doubt that they get a replacement for Swift, even though he is under contract. And then Judkins can be that David Montgomery. They're very similar types of runners. So that's a good likelihood for him, but I still think I would go Josh Jacobs. I mean, he had a top 8 finish last year, and I didn't see him slow down at all, and he's shown nothing but durability throughout his NFL career. So, yeah, I'm going to lean Josh Jacobs here. All right. Which crash out artist are we going for? We got Luther Burden III or George Pickens. Which one are you leaning here?
I think it's pretty easily Luther Burden III. As far as what we know right now, he's potentially a back half of the first round, probably set early to mid second round pick, though, in real life. A potential landing spot could definitely be New England, for instance. Assuming they don't take a wide receiver like Travis Hunter, for instance, is off the board by the time they're up to pick. If he's available, I think they do go Hunter. But yeah, I think that Burden could potentially be a landing spot for there. I would love that. As far as some other landing spots, potentially Denver way down in the end of the first round. Definitely some other landing spots, maybe even the Titans, right? So I definitely think there are some high upside landing spots for Burden. He's a yak monster. He's definitely the type of profile I want to bet on for fantasy. Now, as far as Pickens is concerned, he's definitely talented, but he's the wide receiver 2, I think, behind DK Metcalf, or at worst, he's probably not, the dominant wide receiver 1 in terms of target share in that offense. As of now, they don't have a quarterback. They could potentially get Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, it's okay, I guess, for 1 year maybe. But I just don't really want anything to do with an Arthur Smith offense and somebody that could potentially be a wide receiver 2. And they've also been linked to Shedeur Sanders potentially if he slides enough. I don't really care for Teddy Bridgewater throwing to a wide receiver 2 and a Arthur Smith offense personally. So definitely going to lean Luther Burden here.
Yeah, in the case of George Pickens, right, he's very much a interesting personality, which, I don't know if that helps or hurts him necessarily, but he is coming off a relatively bad performance as well, where, he dropped a couple of his targets and he kind of crashed out on the field a little bit, which isn't super uncommon. So I don't know how that affects his longevity as a wide receiver in the NFL. And Luther Burden, he's a little bit of a hothead as well, but not as bad as George Pickens, obviously. Could you imagine if the Steelers say, you know what, we kind of need a slot receiver. Calvin Austin's just not it. And they get Luther Burden in the back half of the first round. And they have DK, Luther Burden, and George Pickens. Somebody's going to die in OTAs if that's the case. But yeah, I definitely see what you're saying in terms of Luther Burden. I think just because of his unreal yak ability, he's doing that in the SEC as well, where it translates kind of okay to the NFL. It's definitely the toughest division in college football. So I probably lean Luther Burden as well. He's going to give you a bunch of really big boom weeks as well if he gets significant playing time his rookie year. So yeah, I'm definitely going to lean towards Burden here. All right, moving on to our last slide here. We got Matthew Golden or Josh Downs. How do you feel about this one? This one's relatively close for me as well, mainly just due to situation, but let me hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I know people are gonna say that this is a crazy comparison because a lot of people are really high on Matthew Golden. I think Golden is fine. I like him as a prospect. I'm not maybe as high on him as some other people are that might have him as their wide receiver one. There is the potential that I would rather have Golden than Josh Downs. If Golden gets first round draft capital and goes to a spot where he could get a significant target share, there's definitely an opportunity for me to lean Matthew Golden. As far as Josh Downs, he isn't as bad about as worse of a situation as he could possibly find himself in, with having Anthony Richardson as his quarterback. But he still produces anyways. And like you said earlier in the video, maybe there's a chance that Daniel Jones replaces him, which would be great in my opinion for Josh Downs. He would feed. Think Wan'Dale Robinson production, except Josh Downs is actually really good after the catch too. So you would have more boom plays than Wan'Dale. So I think that even though Josh Downs is in a crowded offense with the likes of Pittman, potentially even a first round tight end, Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce, AD Mitchell, and the like, I think I would probably lean Josh Downs because he's still producing despite the situation. But I definitely could see an avenue where Matthew Golden, gets that first round draft capital and goes to a spot where he could get significant target volume.
Yeah, and you've seen Daniel Jones in the past, like you said, with Wan'Dale Robinson just peppering him with targets. If that's the case, I could easily see Josh Downs going over 1,000 receiving yards. He's been close to it before. He's been like a 700, 900-yard guy, right? I really do enjoy Josh Downs as a player, and Matthew Golden, he ran really fast combine. We already knew he was fast, but, he just doesn't show that speed on film all too often. I mean, after the catch, yeah, he does, but during his, running of his routes, he doesn't look nearly as fast there. So I think he's quite limited. I think he's probably just a Z or a slot and won't be able to play the X role, which isn't the end of the world. But there's just some limitations to his game that I probably would lean Josh Downs on. I could lean Golden too. It's very close just because of how irritating that Colts offense can be at times. But yeah, I probably lean Josh Downs here. All right, and that's 10 this or that, rookie versus vet. Definitely leaning more so the rookies. That is a testament to how good this draft class is. If you want to see more of these, we're definitely open to doing more of the second and third tier players in the draft class as well. If you enjoy this video, we kind of stuck towards the higher end, early second to first round picks. So for sure. Is there anything you want to say before we head out?
Yeah, so feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel. We really appreciate it. Make sure you check out the Patreon. We're going to host live streams there every single week. We're going to have team-specific breakdowns for you and suggest trades you can make based on your specific league settings. And you'll also have the ability to suggest videos and view videos early, so make sure you check that out. And yeah, let us know, where do you disagree the most, and where do you generally agree with the list and the decisions with which we made?
All right, guys, and last but not least, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.